Ellie Evans parked her patrol car at the back of the Shipton Cove police station, her breath misting in the frigid air as she gathered the remnants of her lunch. A half-eaten sandwich and an empty coffee cup. Winter had arrived with an unforgiving vengeance this year, and the snow under her boots compacted with a soft crunch as she trudged toward the station. Overhead, the dark Alaskan sky threatened more snowfall, but Ellie was too used to the gloom to pay it much mind. She tossed the trash into the bin and greeted her colleague Mike, who was gearing up for the night shift. Mike, the town sergeant, had lived his entire life in Shipton Cove, a small, declining fishing town nestled on Alaska's rugged coast. Once home to a bustling population, the town now barely clung to life with its 5,000 residents, most of them fishermen or elderly retirees. The young had long since fled to the cities, drawn by jobs and conveniences that Shipton Cove could never offer. "How'd your day go?" Mike asked, his eyes on the ancient computer at his desk. Ellie sighed, peeling off her gloves. Break-in at old Tussler's garage. Some punks stole a bunch of tools. Expensive stuff too. Mike let out a low chuckle, one devoid of humour. That'll put Tussler out for a while. Ellie knew the truth of it. Old Tussler's finances were already hanging by a thread, and unless the stolen tools were recovered, his workshop, his livelihood, was as good as gone. After a quick change in the locker room, Ellie locked away her service weapon and headed out into the night. The main street of Shipton Cove was eerily quiet, the usual winter silence broken only by the occasional howl of the wind. She stopped at the Zodiac Bar, the town's one lively establishment, hoping to escape the pervasive melancholy that seemed to seep into her bones. Inside, the warmth and noise were a welcome contrast to the cold. Ellie ordered a beer and sat at the bar, half listening to the group of fishermen nearby. Their stories were familiar. Odd sounds in the water, lights beneath the waves, and the ever-present decline of the salmon population. One man swore he'd seen something flickering under the ocean surface, a ghostly light that danced and then disappeared. The talk turned darker with the drinks, blaming government experiments and conspiracy theories for their dwindling livelihood. Ellie left before the gloom could root itself any deeper. She paid her tab and stepped back into the icy night. As she walked home, the orange glow of the streetlights illuminated the town's decay, darkened houses and dilapidated shops, remnants of a once thriving community. She shivered, unsure whether it was from the cold or the hopelessness that seemed to cling to the town like a shadow. At home, she settled into her worn-out sofa, book in hand, trying to immerse herself in Alaskan folk tales, stories of spirits and monsters that had shaped the minds of those who called this wild land home. But sleep claimed her before long, and when she woke, the wind was howling. Ellie noticed the neighbour's dog, barking incessantly. Strange, she thought. It only barked for the mailman, and there was no mail on Saturdays. She brushed it off, listening instead to the rising wind. Snowdrifts had piled against the houses overnight, and the storm was intensifying. A foreboding sense settled over her as she thought of the fishermen who might be caught in the open waters. Feeling restless, Ellie decided to check in at the station. The streets were empty, the wind keening through the wooden structures of the town. A flock of seagulls passed overhead, flying inland. A peculiar sight, even with a storm brewing. She pushed the thought aside as she entered the station, where Mike was briefing Andy, the weekend shift officer. The radio crackled to life, Nora from the Marine Department's voice breaking through. A fishing boat had called in, reporting trouble just beyond the harbour. The crew claimed to have hit something underwater, something big. Ellie and Mike exchanged a look before grabbing their gear and heading for the harbour. Andy stayed behind to man the radio. As they drove through the worsening storm, another frantic call came through. The voice on the other end was panicked, screaming about unusual waves and something massive breaking the ocean surface. When they reached the harbour, a crowd had gathered, braving the gale-force winds to stare out at the water. Ellie followed their gaze and froze. Just beyond the harbour, a colossal object was rising from the waves. It was a dark grey cube, the size of a football field, its surface slick with seawater. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Mike muttered something about an experimental submarine, but Ellie knew better. This wasn't man-made. The cube continued to rise, and as Ellie moved closer to the shore, she saw it for what it was. Not a machine, but a creature. Its surface was mottled, part organic, part metallic, with crab-like legs that snapped and buckled under its own weight as it collapsed onto the beach. The air filled with the stench of rotting fish and the groans of failing machinery. One side of the creature's body split open with a deafening crash, and water gushed out carrying millions of salmon. Ellie stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding as the creature let out a final, guttural growl before falling silent. The cube, the creature, was dead, its mangled body spilling its grisly contents onto the shore. The fishermen would feast again, but Ellie knew this was only the beginning of something far darker. Shipton Cove's struggles were far from over, and the secrets of the ocean were deeper than anyone could fathom.